Now we move on to the Metro President race, and we're going to go alphabetically with Tom Hughes.
I'm Tom Hughes, and I'm a candidate for Metro President. Bob and I have done, I think this is our 43rd public appearance during this campaign, and it's kind of a crapshoot as to which of us gets to go first. But sort of one of the unwritten rules is that whoever gets to go first gets to do what we call Metro 101, because one of the things that we've discovered in running for this race is that there are a lot of people around the region that range from being deeply involved in what Metro does and understanding what Metro does to not having a clue. And I think the population is generally skewed towards the latter rather than the former. You guys may be the exception. But as you know, Metro is an organization that has sort of evolved over the years. Started out as a regional government, similar to regional governments in other parts of the country. Made up of a board of directors appointed by local elected officials from different jurisdictions around the region, who gather together to look at and coordinate issues around the regional table. There was general concern around the region about a number of issues related to CRAG, as it was called, Columbia Region Association of Government. And so we passed a home rule charter in this region, and with the support of the legislature, created Metro, which is to this date the only elected regional government in the United States. So it's unique in that respect, and in some respects a bit of an experiment, one that no one else has copied, by the way, kind of interestingly enough. And then about 8 years ago, about 10 years ago, there was a change in the Metro Charter that changed the nature of the executive office that Bob and I are seeking from an elected executive officer who ran the day-to-day operations of Metro to an elected president of the council who basically proposes to the council a person to be the COO to run the organization. That person right now happens to be Michael Jordan. In my view, is doing a great job around the organization, and hopefully will continue for a while. He should be happy to hear that, I suppose. But I think it's one of the non-controversial things in this election. So who am I and why? What does Metro do? So we do some regional land use planning. Primarily, the biggest issue in regional planning is establishing the urban growth boundary. So around the state of Oregon, every city has an urban growth boundary. In the Portland metropolitan area, the 25 cities in Metro have a joint urban growth boundary that is established, expanded, contracted, making sure we have contracted. We haven't actually yet. Making sure that we have enough land for a 20-year land supply, and that's done by Metro after a fairly usually long and involved process, which they are just now in the process of completing. They do that once every 5 years. Federal dollars that come to the region, flexible funding that comes from the federal government that comes to the region for transportation is allocated through a Metro process that involves a committee called the Joint Policy Advisory Council on Transportation, or JPAC. And JPAC is a Metro entity that sort of identifies the projects that are going to get funded with federal funding. They also primarily responsible for dealing with the solid waste. They don't pick up your garbage, but they make sure that the people who do pick up your garbage have some place to take it. In the case of the Portland Metro region, of course, that's Arlington, because after a long discussion around the region, they couldn't find a location in the region that didn't have a huge hue and cry against it. And so Arlington, the folks said, hey, we want the jobs, bring your garbage up here. And we've been doing that ever since. They also run, there's been these regional facilities that local governments, many of them were local governments, and they said, okay, let's don't do a zoo anymore. Isn't that really a regional function? How about if we transfer it to Metro? Kind of like the discussion that was going on about the Selwood Bridge and some of the other bridges. You know, hey, we're tired of funding this. You know, everybody seems to be using it around the region. How about if Metro takes that over? And over the years, Metro has assumed responsibility for the zoo, the expo center, the Performing Arts Center downtown. And then when we got around to building a convention center, they said, well, let's let Metro do it. So Metro also runs the convention center. So they have all of these regional facilities. We own land out around the region and beyond, land that was purchased through bond levies that were passed by the voters to get open space. Why am I the person that you should consider to run this organization? I've just spent the last 8 years, actually 8 years from 2001 to 2009 as mayor of Hillsborough. Fifth largest city in the state. It has actually the same size staff and about the same size budget as Metro does. Metro, of course, has a larger geographic area, but Hillsborough is as complex and diverse as the metropolitan region. And in that regard, I learned how to be a manager, an elected manager, in the same kind of a system of government that Metro has. So it's basically a council manager form of government. I also spent a lot of time while I was in Hillsborough working on recruiting companies, expanding our business opportunities, working with our business community to create an environment in which businesses were comfortable locating, were comfortable expanding. And during the period while I was mayor, we created, according to our economists, we created about 33,000 jobs. It was almost the only part of the region that was actually expanding jobs at the time that I was mayor, and we have continued to do that. The announcement that Intel made just last week that they're going to continue to expand out there. I want to take that experience and that knowledge to the rest of the region and do that in cooperation with our local partners around the region. The other thing is that it would be the first time that the elected executive officer, whether it was the executive officer or the president, has come from any place other than Portland. And that's not a rip on Portland, that simply is a perspective. To look at an organization from the same perspective time after time after time after time gives you sort of an echo chamber approach. It's healthy for an organization every once in a while to turn things inside out and look at it from the outside in. Coming from the outside of the Portland metro area, or outside of Portland, one of the other 24 communities in Metro, gives me an opportunity to bring that perspective to Metro as an organization. So I'm going to stop with that and see if there's any questions. How much? We have 3 minutes. Yes, sir.
Yes, I've been following the Columbia River crossing.
Yes.
For the last 4 or 5 years, whenever it started to exist. And I support the idea of at least a new freeway bridge because I think it's necessary for safety. But I don't see tearing down the existing bridges when that could be used for the alternative transportation options. The thorniest issue is the tolls. And just like the Selwood Bridge, it's all being placed on the back of the motorists. And it seems like the tolls ought to be spread out through all the other users. How do you feel about the Columbia crossing?
Well, I'm in favor of moving forward with the project as it's been proposed, if only because that's the project that we've moved to this point. I don't want to drop back and start the planning process all over again. I think we're very good at planning in this region. We're not so good at implementing. I think it's time to move from planning to implementation.
What about the tolling part of it?
The tolling, I think, actually has begun to be worked out, and of course the big hitch was Vancouver appeared to be in opposition to polls. The mayor of Vancouver actually, I think, has moved to a more reasonable position, and in fact has proposed what I think is the ultimate and reasonable proposal, which is that we toll the whole project. So the project is about $900 million for the bridge, $900 million for the interchanges north of the river, $750 for the one south of the river. But what Mayor Levitt has proposed is that if you got on at SR 500 and off at SR 14, you'd pay a toll because that part of the project costs money too. And of course, then you do the light rail where people would pay fares as they came across, and that would help. I'm like you a little bit though. I think one of the frustrations that a lot of us have about the expansion of the bicycle system in the city of Portland and around the region is it appears that the bicycle folks don't contribute. So I would like to see, even if it's just a token registration fee or some mechanism to go to the bicycle community and say, okay, you need to pay a share of the cost of providing those facilities. So I'd be in favor of that. Yes, sir. I got 1 minute.
Yeah, real quick. If you're elected and you're in office in 6 years when the county charter could be changed regarding ownership or maintenance of the bridges, could you support an initiative for maybe Metro to take over that responsibility as they do the regional transportation planning and do operate some
Real quickly, and I think one of the problems with planning, taking over planning responsibility was relatively easy to do because Metro houses a whole bunch of planners. So on staff there already was a planning component. The difficulty is, and I'm not sure about Multnomah County as much as I am about Washington and Clackamas County. Both Washington and Clackamas County maintain public works departments that are used to improving building and restoring roads. Metro has no function like that with it at all, so it would have to create a whole new group of folks to sort of manage the bridges in the way that the counties manage the roads. I'm not sure that's the best alternative, but certainly over the next few years, as the county charter gets up for review, I think it would be reasonable to look at that. Thank you.